We have a crisis. We see it on Southwest Florida beaches in a rotting stew of dead fish. That's caused by an explosion of a microorganism called K. brevis.
I'm just completely shocked at the loss of life here.
And we see it in the Caloosahatchee River and Lake Okeechobee in a brew of green slime. That's caused by an infestation of cyanobacteria. Both kill marine life. Both can make people sick.
It's overwhelming. I mean, as soon as you get out of the car, you start coughing and, it's just your chest hurts.
K. brevis can cause breathing problems when the toxin drifts in the air.
A lot of dead fish, a lot of dark water, a lot of people coughing.
And cyanobacteria emits a neurotoxin scientists have associated with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Lou Gehrig's disease.
Long-term risks of these toxic algae, the most common one that actually has been studied, and the research came out about 2 years ago, is end-stage liver disease, and that's actually deadly.
Both cyanobacteria in freshwater and K. brevis in saltwater feed off of nutrients from manure and chemical fertilizer. That is a big part of our problem. Our state has a combination of leaking septic tanks and fertilizer seeping into our water supply from people's lawns and from dairy farms and from sugar farms, which brings us now to the mess in Lake Okeechobee.
Algae blooms are usually caused by excessive nutrients.
Here's what happened. Lake Okeechobee naturally flowed south into the Everglades, but last century our government built a dike around it to prevent flooding for people who move near the lake. That redirects the lake flow east into the Atlantic and west into the Gulf. Towns and sugar farms filled in the south, and Lake Okeechobee got polluted with fertilizer and pesticide because of runoff from towns and residential development, and from dairy farms to the north, and to a large extent from the sugar fields to the south. Now you may be thinking, wait a minute, those sugar fields are south of the lake. Wouldn't the runoff go south away from the lake? Well, yes, it would, except the sugar farmers used to back pump into the lake, and the state continued to back pump polluted water north into the lake, again to prevent flooding.
As long as we have to release water, then we're going to have this pollution problem.
This is beyond just an ecological disaster. It's an economic disaster.
In sunlight and in heat, those nutrients cook up thick batches of cyanobacteria, which produce the toxic green sludge in fresh water, and it can feed the K. brevis organisms in saltwater that cause the red tide fish kills. Well, scientists cannot say for sure the flow from the lake is causing the red tide, but there is certainly a correlation between the blooms and the flow of polluted water from the lake that can feed them.
I'm angry. We moved here for a reason. People come here for a reason.
Homeowners and boaters and businesses that depend on tourism are livid.
It's going to be crippling to our economy when there's so many businesses that depend on the clean water that we have here.
We know we've had this crisis for decades, and in the 1980s, former Governor Bob Graham took the lead in trying to fix it.
The history in Florida is that water belongs to the people of Florida.
Graham created the state agency to control urban sprawl, and he launched and led the Save Our Everglades campaign to restore the natural flow of Lake Okeechobee through the Everglades. Graham's successors tried to keep it going in different ways, but as legal battles and politics played out, plans sputtered and had a way of going south more than the water. For example, in the 1990s, voters passed an amendment to make polluters pay for cleanup, but the legislature failed to implement it at first and then watered it down. In 2000, President Clinton and former Governor Jeb Bush struck a deal called the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. The state and feds agreed to split the cost of cleaning up and restoring the Everglades through a series of water storage projects. But Congress did not live up to its end of the deal. And then Governor Charlie Crist moved on from that and shifted to a much bolder and different plan to restore the ecosystem.
I can envision no better gift to the Everglades, the people of Florida, and the people of America as well as our planet than to place in public ownership this missing link that represents the key to true restoration.
Crist struck a deal to buy out and shut down 187,000 acres of sugar farms for $1.75 billion.
This does it in a way that we can transition out and take care of the employees and the communities. At the same time, the governor's taking care of the Everglades restoration. So I thought it hit the right balance at the right time.
$1.75 billion is a large investment, but the restoration value that we are buying is much larger. In fact, it's priceless.
But the state later scaled that back. And then Crist ran for Senate instead of seeing it through and left the option to buy much of that land to his successor, Rick Scott. And Governor Scott took a pass.
Florida is open for business.
Governor Scott wanted to spur business and development in a bad economy, so he relaxed environmental regulations and state controls on urban sprawl and slashed funding for environmental protection. And then, as the economy improved, he ramped up money for the environment. Scott signed a deal to spend $32 million a year on improving the Everglades through water treatment and storage systems. Environmentalists praised him for that, but ripped him for the prior cuts and for slashing oversight.
What do we want? Clean water! When do we want it? Now!
We'll take a closer look at the water crisis and the changes and perspective from both sides in the coming rounds of Money, Power, and Politics.